What's good with the YouTube? You already know. Big Flacco from Convict's Perspective. And as always, you already know. I'm smashing, I'm dashing, I'm sliding on through with what? A little bit of energy, man. So check this out, man. Today's title is an interesting topic. We're going to be discussing one of the biggest groups in the federal prison system. Okay. Everybody knows that the Paisas are the deepest. And they go by terms such as the Paisa Car and the Paisa Alliance. And what that consists of is several prison gang organizations that are primarily of Mexican nationalists. You know, what I mean, those that are involved in drug trafficking, coyotes, polleros, all that, all those things that Mexico, the illicit activities, what gets them caught up on a Fed case, man. These are what these organizations do. Okay, now this consists of several different gangs. You have the BBs, the Border Brothers. I have a personal experience with some. The original Border Brothers formed around 87 and 88 over there in TJ, Tijuana area. And it was primarily consisted of all cities along the border. TJ, Nogales, Juarez, that were living in the United States and California. And they started their own little organization, their own prison gang to pretty much protect themselves and kind of govern the overall agenda of the bison movement behind the walls. They had certain little rules and reglas. You know, you had to earn each BB. A little bit different than what you would consist of the BBs in Oakland. I've heard that the BBs in Oakland also had some influence by them, but they're basically almost two separate entities, but at the same time together. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. Now the BBs have migrated to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and all these different areas, man. The BBs are pretty deep. And I actually had a celly, man. He ran everything down to me, man. He was really cool. 30, you know what I'm saying? Real solid individual, man. Was definitely with the business, man. Had a lot of respect for Norteños. And I noticed that a lot of BBs in general used to have a lot of conflict with Sureños at that time, okay? And now one of the other groups is called the Paisa 16 or 16, right? Which, the Paisa gang, basically the 16 stands for the letter P, 16th letter of the alphabet. They're probably the deepest out of all these groups because a lot of them are just regular Paisas and they just pretty much align with that group. There's an estimated 20,000 to 23,000 P16. That's pretty deep, you know, within a prison group organization. They do have a loose type of a organizational structure and a blood in, blood out oath, kind of like all these other groups, but they have less rigorous expectations for the group. Okay, the next one would be the PRM. I'm gonna say it in English a little bit easier, which is basically the Mexican Revolution Party, which has its ties to Mexico, which is a little bit less in numbers, but more aligned to the political involvement that occurs over there in Mexico. And like anything, some of these groups and causes, man, they commit certain activities in coming over to the United States because the United States is a melting pot for them to make money. And a lot of these groups, they work with certain other Mexican nationalists. What I mean by that is the bigger groups, the cartels and so forth, man. And doing their bidding, their assistance, their trafficking, and, you know, just like the Barrio Azteca does as well. Okay, the other group would be called the Tango, Paisa Mexicles. I mean, it's a hard word to pronounce, man, but they're a pretty deep group, man. And they started in the Texas Department of Corrections. And what they were a bunch of Paisas that came over that did time in the Department of Corrections in Texas and formed basically like their own little tango group in response to all the STG groups in order to protect themselves. Mexicles, something like that. That's how you say it, man. They're a very big group. They're very deep. And that word basically is a traditional person from Mexico. That's what that word stands for. So what this is a group of all four and other smaller Mexican groups that work parallel together. Now, if you go into any federal prison, you ask anybody that's done Fed time, the deepest car in prison is the Paisas. They are the most deepest in there. They're with the business. They're a lot more structured because over the last 20 years, as we all know, the 90s, the cartels in Colombia running all the cocaine. Before along the borders in Mexico, They didn't call themselves cartels back in the days in the 70s and 80s. They called themselves families, but they kind of operated kind of independently like a cartel. Now you have people that have those labels as cartels. And with that, the trafficking of drugs, narcotics, and um, you know, humans has become a big business industry with operations consisting all the time. So things have technically changed in a lot of ways to where these groups, organizations have gotten involved. Just like a perfect example would be like the NF and the MA, how they have the Sureños, Norteños do their bidding out there in the streets and on the prison lines. It's kind of the same way with them, but this is on a whole higher level, man. These individuals are actually plugged in and they have a lot more organizational structure than people believe, but they also have a lot of numbers. So with that comes a whole different type of I'm not going to call it paramilitary structure, but a system. You know what I'm saying? Where you have the elites within these groups, which is very few, who are organizing everything to their lower bodies out there within the prison system, to where you could just be a regular foot soldier. It could be something basic that you're instructed to do, but everybody's going to get involved, man. And they've had they've had issues with almost every group. You know, anyone from the Sureños and the Norteños to the Texas Car and so forth, man, because they work independently. You know what I'm saying? But in general, most of the time they're going to operate and everybody's going to want to plug in with them or have a working relationship with them. Because even if they're dealing with an individual that's not like a traditional like convict that's treacherous with a business, they know that these resources are there. So everybody's trying to plug into these groups. And so in order for them to protect themselves, right? Because they didn't just have to worry about, other raza, they had to worry about other groups. One of the biggest Africano cars in there is the DC Blacks. You know what I'm saying? Who have issues with a lot of people and have a more treacherous get down. You have a lot of other groups. So they've been able to stand up on their own by forming what you call the Paisa Car or the Paisa Alliance. And it consists of all these groups. It's kind of interesting because years ago, the Paisa cars in general were not looked at as far as being organized, being structured. They were just there, just doing their time. And all these groups, man, they've also opened up recruitment, like the PRM. They've opened up recruitment to other areas like Honduras, South America, Ecuador, Peru. All these areas are now open to most of these groups to be recruited. So if you find someone who's say independently doing some time for some high power stuff that's out of Colombia or something like that, they'll open those doors for them to join any of these particular groups, because all that's going to do is bring them more assets and resources for them to operate. A lot of talk is not talked about the Paisa crews in general, man. And what I find neat about this is that you have all these groups. Well, basically, majority of these groups have been formed between 87 and 94. Okay, I know the PRM started about 94. I know the Tango Paisa Mexicles, they started around 94 as well. And the Paisa 16, 17, they started around the same time, maybe a little bit early, maybe 92, 91, I believe, man. So these groups have been around, and we know how much of a power struggle occurs anytime you have that much manpower. Anytime you have that many people trying to work hand in hand. For some reason, they've been able to make it work and coexist. And they're the ones that are flourishing. They're the ones that are deep out there in these lineas. Not any of these other groups. It's not the Sureños that are the deepest. It's not the Africanos. It's not the Norteños. It's the Paisa crews. The Paisa Alliance and the Paisa Car, which they all work parallel together. They all have their different chain of command. They have their different structure. But it's almost like they have one working force where they're all able to work together. You know what I'm saying? And most of these crews are all affiliated, man. And it seems like Texas has a big thing to do with all these crews. I think because Texas has enabled them to come across the border and have much more influence in their interactions, because a lot of them are coming from Juarez. Whereas in California, a lot of the ones that are coming over through there, they're not having as much of impact in California politics, if that makes sense. Anyways, this is a quick spill. Convict's perspective. We're trying to push a hardcore message. And we're trying to bring up different topics, man, different things that you may have never heard, man. And I know people have been asking a little bit about the bicycle. And so this is basically a brief breakdown, man. They all have a different little assembly as like they have the P31, P16, BB, you know what I mean? Those are all different groups and how they operate, man. But somehow, some way, they've been able to work and coexist together, man. And I kind of want to see where this goes. And I wonder what their relationship is going to be like with the MS-13. Who is their biggest threat across the border? You know what I mean? Especially in southern Mexico, would probably be the MS-13. So I wonder how that type of interaction is going to go on in the Fed system in the main lines, or if there's been problems. It seems like there's so many different prison organizations and groups. That I don't know how they're all able to maintain. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, this is a quick spill, man. For Convicts Perspectives, your boy Flacco. I'm out.